Welcome to Chris and Jen in the Morning.
Where it's always morning somewhere. I'm Chris.
And I'm Jen. We're excited to have you with us this morning.
Welcome
or
back,
afternoon.
everybody.
Or whatever time it is, wherever you're at. So, Chris, it's great to see you this morning. I'm so appreciative of you being patient with me because I was late again this morning. And
To know you is to know you is to love. That time is Jen's, understanding
it's a
of it.
mystery. Time and space is always a mystery. And I also was not respectful of my morning schedule this morning. So I'm sure to know me is to know you should probably just add a little time to whatever time we say we're going to do something and be okay with that.
Some buffer time.
Or one of the things that we decided to do is start out our podcasts with a little bit of gratitude. In our Finding Happiness episode, we talked about the practice of gratitude. And after reflecting on that, talking about it a little bit, we said, you know what, we should actually start out each of our episodes with a gratitude moment. So, Chris, I think you have a gratitude moment to share.
I do, and it's actually to you for making a recommendation to us. So back when we were talking about like TV shows that we were watching, kind of our feel-good shows, you had mentioned that Gilmore Girls was your feel-good show.
It is.
And so I added it to my list of things to watch. And this last week, just found myself in the living room, like not really wanting to watch anything that was on TV. So I was like, let me just, Gilmore Girls. I think Jen said that was on Netflix. So I flipped over, found it, started it. And Frank and I we've been binge watching it for the entire week. Like, I think we're on to season 2 or 3 at this point. And it is like, it's a really good show. Like the writing is super funny. There's a lot of diversity from the way like the characters show up. Like it's not like a carbon copy of all the same characters.
Yeah.
But it also gives me like the small town vibes of the very thing that like I would not want to live in. So
I mean, like, I guess because it doesn't feel like it could be a reality for me. The grass is greener. I play that a lot. Like, I really wish I lived in a small town.
Yeah, until you start watching something like this, and then everyone knows stuff. Like, I think one of the episodes, like, something had happened to one of the characters, to the daughter, and then by the time she made it from where the thing happened to home, her mom already knew about it.
Everybody knows about it. Everybody knows about it. Yeah.
So it's been fun. Like Frank and I, it's created like conversation for us and, things that, we like that character. We don't like that character. Why is that? And then who is that person? Like they look familiar, but this show is like, it was done back in the early 2000s. Right. And so some of these characters like are super young and like we know them now based on like shows and movies and things they've been in. But they just look so young in this show.
It's so good. It's so good. Well, I am so glad that you are getting your cup filled in watching Gilmore Girls, and I can't wait to hear more about what your thoughts are. I'm also super glad that Frank and I are on the same team. #WeHateDean.
Is that a real hashtag, or are you going to start that hashtag?
I mean, I just made it, but it comes from the heart. So... Speaking of advice, we want to talk a little bit about advice today. Sometimes you get advice, solicited or unsolicited, about things like what shows to watch. Sometimes it's a little more personal advice about how you show up or how to be happier. And so Chris and I have been talking a little bit about some of the best advice that we've received, and we thought, hey, let's share some of that advice with each other today on the podcast. So, Chris, what's some of the best? Well, actually, before we talk about our best advice, I think you may have some really good advice for us on how to best receive advice.
Yeah, I think like we were talking about, there's advice can come from so many different places, and sometimes it's sought out, sometimes it's just given. Um, but I do believe it's important to be open and hear it. I think when people offer advice, sometimes it doesn't, like in that moment, it may not come across as advice, or like the person doesn't frame it in that way or whatever. But I think it is there's a, when you reflect on it, it may be like, ooh, maybe they were giving me advice, or maybe that was a really good tidbit. And so I'm going to hold on to that.
Even if it's somebody that you like don't identify with, completely don't agree with, different from feedback.
Correct.
Advice. We're not talking about feedback. Feedback
No,
is like aimed at you, about, specifically you, and advice is more how to kind of manage things and,
yeah, navigate.
um,
And
yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah, in fact, one of the, when I look back on like pieces of advice that I still like keep near and dear to my heart, um, one of the pieces of advice comes from someone that I worked with once upon a time, and we did not get along. Like, we even went into a room to have a conversation and basically told each other we don't enjoy working with one another. It is not like, we acknowledged it and moved
You
on.
you like literally went into the room, looked at each other in the face in close proximity to each other, and said, "I don't like you."
We 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 were trying to work through some stuff, and then when it just really came down to it, it was just, we didn't appreciate each other's styles. We didn't appreciate each other's working styles,
Did
which
that
was
like draw
fine.
you?
Like,
Did that draw you closer, or was it more of just a
no, I
we
think it
both
just helped.
acknowledge we're in this place?
Exactly. I think because we both acknowledged at that point that it, like what the real situation was. Like, I am the type of person that I try to go out of my way. I try to help people. I try to whatever. This person did not feel that way. Like, this is my job. This is what I do, and don't ask me to do any more, because I'm not going to. Which was just foreign to me, because the team that we worked on, although we didn't work directly with one another, we were like in each other's orbit. And so I'm like, how do you not just like offer help, you know? So anyways, we end up going, before that conversation, we ended up going to this like event where there were lots of people, and they
Yeah.
broke everyone up into small groups. And one of the like icebreakers was to share advice that is important, or that you always go back to. And
And
the
this
advice
person
that,
had some
yeah,
good advice.
they did. And I still, like I said, I still think about it when I'm feeling overwhelmed. So the advice is, when you're not sure where to start, just start somewhere. So
Yeah.
the way that they framed it is like, if you go into a room that has to be cleaned out and you're overwhelmed by how much of a mess it is, like, just start with one shelf, or start with one box, and start working your way through it. And that may lead you to needing to focus on a different area, so that now you can have space to put that stuff or whatever. But at least just start somewhere, focus on that thing. So that way the whole issue is not something that becomes overwhelming. So that's like something that I still hold near and dear to me. Like, if I'm feeling overwhelmed when approaching a problem, I'm like, where can I start? And we may like change our approaches as we get started, but we have to start it somewhere. So
I
that's
love
always
that.
been something that not only something that I have internalized, but also I share with people, especially when like having conversation, and I'm picking up that they may be feeling overwhelmed by the problem, issue, whatever.
I love that. And I love that it came from somewhere completely like surprising to you, and that you were able to take it and say, you know what, this person and I don't see eye to eye at all. We don't even like each other, and we've told each other that, and yet that's good advice, and I'm going to take it. So I love that. Um, one of the best pieces of advice I was given, and this is advice that I give other people as well, is to just, when you're in that moment where you're feeling, whether it's like anxious or um stressed out about something or overwhelmed by something, just pause and take 3 deep breaths and then resume whatever it is that you're doing, because you're actually returning oxygen to the brain. And when you're getting like frazzled or stressed or anxious or whatever, like imagine yourself, we've maybe not all been here, but I've been here frequently. You can't find your whatever keys to get out the door, you're running late. And then, the fact that you're running late is making you more stressed. And
Yeah.
are we surprised that's my example? Because given our conversation about time being a mystery to me, but you pause and you take 3 deep breaths and you return, the oxygen to your brain, and then you can actually like start to problem solve and think more rationally. But when you start to get stressed, or maybe it's not stressed, maybe it's upset or angry, or people don't even realize that they do this, but they start to hold their breath and their brain is like being depleted of oxygen. So you actually can't get better at solving the problem. You get worse, and then you just keep
Yeah.
escalating.
Well, I
So I've
think when
used
you're
this.
in that frazzled state, it's very easy to almost go into that like fight or flight type situation.
Yeah,
And so your adrenaline kicks in, like all the things. So
I've
that's
used
really
this
good
at work a
advice.
lot. Where, especially when we used to be in the office, and, work with people, from a proximity standpoint next to each other. And I would see somebody on my team getting, upset or anxious or, overwhelmed by something that they were trying to handle. And I would just like stand next to them and say, okay, we're going to take 3 really deep breaths and let's do it together. And we would go through the exercise of taking the deep breath in and out together. And then, okay, now let's do number 2. Okay, now let's do number 3. And then we'd kind of laugh and smile because it sort of breaks up the energy. But then, like, I don't think there's been a single time that I've done that either for myself or with somebody else where I have thought, oh, that wasn't helpful at all. Like usually it just helps kind of break the momentum, and then get you moving down a path that feels like you can now solve the problem or approach it from a different angle.
Yeah, that's great advice. I'm
Yeah,
going to
love
start
that
using
one.
that.
What what else? What other advice do you have?
So I remember talking with someone who I consider a friend and mentor to this day. And we were talking about just like things that happen in life in general.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about relationships specifically in when this advice was given, but things like, if you're having issues with your spouse, if you're having, what do you do in certain situations? How do you show up? And I took like a very definitive stance on certain things. And there's probably like a 10 to 15-year age difference between the two of us. And she actually, like, we were sitting across the desk. She like leans over her desk and says, I'm going to give you some advice that my dad has given me many times in my life. Keep living. Just keep living. Because it's very easy in these moments when you're not in it, when you're not having to face that problem right now, for you to be like, oh, I would never, or this is what I would do, or this is what I would say. But when you're in that moment, it's very different. And so advice of just keep living.
So
Just
what does
keep
that
living.
mean to you?
To me, it's like in certain moments, I think we can very easily say, I would never tolerate, or this is unfair, and insert anything like that. But then I think once you start having more skin in the game, it can change.
Oh,
And
like,
you may start to see the problem from a different perspective, or the outcome that you're searching for isn't as easy as just like, cut and leave. Um,
it's easy to make an assessment about what you would do
correct.
if you're not personally dealing with it or invested or up front in the middle of it.
Exactly. So that has been anytime like I have been talking to friends who seem like overly in a state of like, I can't believe, or I would never, or things like
Yeah.
that. Like I try to just bring that perspective of keep living. You have,
Keep
that's
living and maybe you will. Maybe you will feel that way, or maybe you won't.
right. Maybe you will, maybe you won't, but also like why get yourself worked up in a frenzy in this moment about it?
Yeah. Maybe just accept that that's where the other person is and move on. Like, what does it have to do with you?
Right.
I
But
like that.
so we went from someone who I did not consider in my in group, someone who I did not like trust, advice that I still use today, to someone who like I still reach out to whenever I
Yeah.
need advice, recommendations. And that piece is still carries on with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so another piece of advice that I was given many years ago, it's kind of like a tool that I use, and I have a couple of note cards, 3x5 note cards that sit in front of my computer monitor, and this is one of those. So it's the time, cost, quality triangle, and this was great advice that serves as a good tool to me, whether it's at work or at home. But basically, it's if you have a triangle and on each of the points, you write cost, quality, and time, you get to pick two of those things to prioritize, but you cannot prioritize all three. So if you think about, you can turn the triangle, to sit on any of its sides and you get the two at the bottom. But you can't prioritize all three. So you cannot be getting something for the cheapest cost with the highest quality at the fastest pace. But if you prioritize getting it fast and doing it cheap, you may be getting less quality than what you could. And you might be okay with that because sometimes the highest quality is not what you're going for. And so I find this to be great advice in how to consider when I'm stuck at what is the best path forward. Let me go back to what are the most important things to me. And I hate having to say or. So this is like I always say I want it all, but this is like a really practical way to frame it up because I can relate to, it does make sense to me that I would never expect to get, the lowest cost with the highest quality at the fastest pace. So I use that quite frequently. I use it at work when I think about how do I have the conversation with somebody to help them prioritize what's most important to them. Do you want to take more time to get this done, but do it like at a higher quality? And then, we can pay more to get more people working on it so we can do it faster. Or do you want to do this for the cheapest? And then that's okay. It's just going to take us a little bit more time. So I think it's a great way to frame a discussion or a decision. Even when I think about buying an appliance at home, it's my husband would tell you, our producer would tell you that I can really sit and spin on making a big purchase. And so it's a good way to help frame up for me. Okay, I don't expect to get, if you frame it up this way, I don't expect to get the highest quality product for the cheapest possible price and get it fastest. So do I want to wait and keep looking for the best sale, or do I want to maybe spend a little bit more money and have it now, or do I want to maybe meet somewhere middle of the road because it meets all of my needs? So great advice that I use and apply quite often.
I think I heard about that in a business class in school, because I think it ties to project management. And so it is interesting to it is applicable beyond just our work lives. It's also pertinent in our personal lives. And I love that you talked about the or piece, because I don't think that it's, to me, it's not saying that this option doesn't exist or it can't be, it shouldn't be taken into consideration. All of these things do exist, but you have to prioritize them. And so which are you choosing to prioritize based on the situation that you're currently in? So I think that's like really good practical advice, especially if you do feel like you are in that place of analysis paralysis. How do you start to shake out of that?
Yeah, it's a great mental model. And I think a great way to get people aligned, because then you also know, like, if, my husband and I are trying to decide a path to go and we're deprioritizing different things, then it's a great way to be able to have the conversation and say, okay, this is maybe why we're not arriving at the same decision. So let's talk about that. Um, so that you can actually like get past all of the, sometimes you like just end up talking past people. And it helps you really kind of get down to it. So it's a great model, great piece of advice I received. And it's one of those things that sits on my desk, and I use it really frequently to think about how to move forward.
Now, my question is, the thing that you have on your desk, is it just a triangle with those labels, or have you cut it out in the shape of a
No, no.
triangle?
It is a 3x5 card that has a triangle on it that has those labels. And I don't need the index card to remember the model, but it's just a visual reminder for myself of, why it's like when I need to remember, it just is kind of like a cue that's there. So that's great. What other advice have you received?
I think you just gave advice without even like really knowing that you gave advice, but having those visual cues, like I think people need to sometimes realize, like sometimes when we get in the thick of things, it is helpful to have those visualizations to pull us back and to help like reground us. So like the advice that I just heard is like, have a 3x5 card or have a sticky note that sits to where you can see it. And like, when you feel like you're in those moments, it can help bring you back to a salient point. So great advice, Jen.
Little pro tip.
Yeah, pro tip. I would say the other thing, other piece of advice that I hold very, very dear to my heart, and I also share it very frequently with many people, is advice that I paid for.
Sometimes
AKA
that's
therapy,
the best advice.
right? And I remember I was really struggling in my personal life with some relationships. And when I was talking to the therapist about it and, trying to explain all of the semantics, the question that was asked of me is like, well, why do you allow that? Like, why are you so concerned about that? And I was like, well, what do you mean? And they shared with me, you allow people to treat you the way that they treat you. And something that I should know, like, it's not a like huge thing. But it really took someone saying that to me for me to truly understand, like, if you don't appreciate the way that someone speaks to you, if you don't appreciate the way that they approach you, the only way to change it is for you to tell them, because they may not be aware of how they're showing up.
It's so true. The way that I've heard that phrased is you teach people how to treat you, or how not to treat you. And so when you allow them to treat you in a way that, is not productive, like you're teaching them that they'll get what they want out of it. So I love that. And I love that you're saying, like, it's not like this was like earth shattering, like it made total sense. But oftentimes I think the best advice I've received is something that I already knew. I just couldn't, I couldn't bring that to myself. I shouldn't say it that way. It's not like I'm trying to say I already know everything. I already know all the great advice. But sometimes you find yourself in that moment where you're like, okay, thank you for that advice. And you're right. Like that's totally what I should be doing. I know that. I just needed to hear it, because in this moment, I can't like think of that for myself.
Yeah. And I think that is what I value about being able to go to others and speak to them about things I'm going through, because in situations, we generally have a harder time to take a different perspective and to see it from another's point of view. And so having those people that you can go to and ask, like, hey, this is the situation I'm in. What are your thoughts? As someone who is not in it, they can kind of approach it with a different mindset and a different perspective. And, I just think yes, I was paying for his advice, but it was like stuff that I already knew, but it was almost like, come on, you know this. And
Yeah.
so how do you enact it? So,
Well, yeah. I mean, so often, when I'm talking to a friend of mine and giving them advice, what I end up saying is, I'm going to share this same advice that you shared with me when I was in a similar situation because it was really helpful to me. And I think like that's the thing about advice. It's not like it's most of the time, it's not because you need to be enlightened because you hadn't considered it. It's just, hey, I'm stuck in this mental, like, I don't know, like impasse. And how do I broaden my thinking to consider something else? Whether it's one of those light bulb moments where you go, man, I never thought about that. I didn't even know I could ask that question. Like, I didn't even know I could step back and think I had a choice in this matter. Or whether it's, I've heard that advice many times and you're right. It's very applicable to me right now. Or sometimes people give you advice and you're like, you know what? Thanks for the advice, but that doesn't feel right for me. And that's totally fine too.
Right. But even I think in those instances, it's helpful because others may use that approach or may.
Yeah.
So again, like to me, it goes back to, it gives me just another data point to kind of view things from and kind of wrap my thoughts and feelings around things because I do have big feelings. And so sometimes I have to be like, all right, we got to press pause on those because like that's not the best approach at this moment to follow those.
Yeah, absolutely. So the kind of last big piece of advice that I think I would choose to share that's been really impactful for me is I received some advice to stop conflating balance and boundaries. So when I think about like the majority of my career while my son was younger and, going through school before he got into college, I was always struggling with this. I want to have it all. I want to go after the career, have it all. But, how do I find this work-life balance? And, it seemed like this elusive thing that you sort of chase and chase and chase until you reach a point in your career where, you finally have the ability to do that. And somebody said to me, well, I think that it's that you're trying to find this way to balance everything, which means you won't say no to anything. And instead, what you need to think about is what are your hard boundaries? So if you draw the boundary and say, you know what, I want to have dinner with my family every night, then, that's the boundary you set and you don't cross that boundary. And you can say, here's what I am okay with and here's what I'm not okay with. Or if it's, hey, I need to make sure that I am available to do XYZ for work. And so this is my boundary. And I've been very fortunate in having a family that's very supportive of me. And, my husband and son have been very supportive of my career. And also, while I had no concept of boundaries versus balance and didn't figure it out right, there's a lot of grace that comes back in that. But it kind of clicked for me when somebody pointed out, like, the reason that you're struggling with this is because you're saying you want balance, but really what you want is to have it all. And the way that you have it all is by creating boundaries and going back to then you teach people how to treat you. And so if they, violate your boundaries in saying, hey, like, this is really critical and I need it right now. And I know that it's, 6:00 on a Friday night. And that's just something that you're always willing to drop everything and do, then they will know they can always do that. So sometimes you have to be flexible depending on your role, depending on what you do. You have to make some of those judgment calls about, is this really urgent? Is this really something I need to prioritize? But what I have, since receiving that advice, what I've watched is other people who are really successful in their career and how they do set boundaries to be able to find the right balance of enjoying life and also, you know, being being able to prioritize their career.
Yeah. And I think that was a huge conversation that went on during the pandemic for a lot of people who started working remote
Yeah.
because then like I feel like a lot of like the physical boundaries that used to be created by going to work and then going home, like those boundaries were now blurred.
Yeah.
And so in those instances, like I remember Frank and I had a conversation because we both found like we would be working until like 7, 8 o'clock at night. We would just
Oh,
keep
yeah.
going.
Because you're just there. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what we finally started doing was, okay, we're going to log off by 6:30 because that's when the world news came on. And so we'd watch the world news and then we would go for what we called our family walk, the two of us and Ollie. And we'd like just go do a quick loop around the neighborhood and come back and make dinner like that because it helped us like create that separation from
I
work.
love
We were able
that.
to log off, close our laptops, transition into more of like that family space. And so I think you have to figure out what works for you in those instances, because it's going to be different for everyone. But I think understanding the difference between finding your boundaries versus finding balance is two very different things.
Yeah. And I think those boundaries don't just apply to time. They also
Yeah.
apply to what you allow to impact you from a feelings standpoint. And this is something that I didn't used to understand. I had the ability to choose. So being able to choose whether I'm going to allow that to rattle me or not, which is a muscle you have to actually build. So some people are born with that muscle and it works really well, and other people like me are not. And so that's something that I've really been trying to practice is setting that boundary of what I allow to infiltrate into my internal kind of space versus what I sort of put in the box and say, okay, this is separate from me. It is not a part of me. So I'm not going to let it keep rattling me. How many times have I called you and been like, oh my gosh, I can't even enjoy my weekend or my night or whatever because I'm like, all anxious or stressed about this whole situation. And it's like I haven't set that boundary. I've allowed it to totally infiltrate. And so just being able to kind of find that right boundary setting, I think is so empowering. There's somebody I work with who's about 10 years younger than me, and she does this really, really well with the boundaries. And it was like watching her do this. And she's incredible and amazing and so well respected. And, you can always count on her when you need something done. She doesn't show up at all like somebody who, oh, well, she's here for work, but not, otherwise. Like reputationally, that she will always be there to get something done and be there for the important things that are needed. But she does just naturally such a great job of boundary setting that I've been able to kind of watch her and sort of go, okay, how can I apply that to myself? Because that's a really positive example of what I would like to do more of.
Yeah. And even just how you framed that, like you and I have talked many times about the things that kind of get us like swirling.
Yeah.
And like you've never framed it that way before. And so I hadn't really thought about it until you just said it. Like some people have it and are able to like easily like step in and out of it. And I think I'm one of those people, but it didn't dawn on me that others don't find
Don't
it
have that.
that easy.
Yeah. Which goes back to your just keep living, give it grace. Like you just don't know. You just don't know. So we also got a piece of advice from our amazing producer before we started today as we were going through kind of agenda for the day. And this is great advice for all of you that
Very
we
practical
definitely
advice.
don't want to be missed.
No.
And that is shower heads are relatively not that expensive. Great shower heads are not that expensive. So don't waste your life with a bad shower head. Also, plungers are pretty cheap too. So don't waste your life carrying a plunger from one bathroom to the next. Have a plunger for every toilet. Cost you $5 or $10.
I feel like that should be a t-shirt. A plunger for every toilet. Advice to live by.
Great advice. Very practical. And, probably great quality of life advice. I will say one thing we learned early on was splurge on the shower head, because having a great shower makes all the difference in the person that I show up as for the day.
Agreed. We don't have great water pressure here. And so we've gone through a few iterations of shower heads to try and get the pressure that we're looking for. And some days it's great and some days it's not.
We actually once stayed at a friend's house who in their extra bathroom had a terrible shower head, and we replaced it. We went to the store and replaced it.
Did they know that you did that?
They were fine with it. They didn't necessarily, but we wouldn't have done it if we were not really, really close friends.
Yeah.
But we were like, did we ever tell them that we did that? Like, we know they don't use that bathroom. It's just the guest bathroom.
But see, I think that's a great friendship whenever you're like, we're going to do it because they know that we love and respect them. And like, I don't know. I think if you're my friend, please feel free. If you feel the need to change the shower, although we only have the one shower here. So I will know if you change the shower head.
You'll know if when I'm there next weekend, I'm replacing the shower head. You're going to know about it.
Great advice.
So one of the other things we want to talk about today is genericization,
yes,
which has nothing to do with advice.
No, nothing. I mean, maybe it does, and maybe as we talk more about it, we'll find that connecting dot.
Maybe we will.
So I remember that this came up. This idea came up to me years ago. I was hanging out with a friend. And I had said something like, oh, can I have a Kleenex? And they said, oh, I don't have a Kleenex. I have a tissue. And I'm like,
you fancy pants.
Isn't it the same thing? Like Kleenex tissue. And they very quickly corrected me. And it's like, no, Kleenex is a brand. A tissue is what you are looking for.
Is this somebody that worked in the marketing sector?
No.
All right.
No.
Okay.
He was he's still roaming the earth. Very intelligent human being who, just knew. He was also really great at trivia, which I struggle with because, have to give an answer in a small amount of time and you're not allowed to Google. And, I have a Google face for a reason,
on.
folks.
Take 3 deep breaths.
So as I was just thinking about this topic, I was like, well, I wonder what else is out there that is, has picked up. So it's basically whenever a brand name becomes the known item. So again, most people refer to tissues as Kleenex because Kleenex has cornered the market in people associating with face tissue being Kleenex.
Yeah.
Band-Aid, also another one. Band-Aid is a brand. It is not the actual wound care.
Yeah.
Thing.
Just like plungers and shower heads, things you find in a bathroom. Kleenexes, Band-Aids.
Oh, are you still trying to make the connection here? This is transit.
I've connected.
Found it.
You know what's really funny is when you said Band-Aid, my thought was, wait a second, are there other brands of Band-Aids or just generic? But I guess Curad is a brand of Band-Aids. It's just so synonymous.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. So, one that I found super interesting though, as I was prepping for us to have this conversation, here in the city, we do not have our own washer and dryer in our apartment, so we have to go to a laundromat. And interestingly enough, laundromat is a word that has become genericized.
I mean, is it really? It's like a place.
So the original, it was a brand. It was a brand of a washing machine.
Oh, interesting.
And it was specifically one that like was mounted or secured into a wall. And so now that's what people refer to laundromats as.
Was it how you laundered your mat? Like a rug?
I think it was just like they're larger machines. So probably.
And you secured it to a wall. That's so interesting. I wonder what happened to that brand. Is it still like alive today?
Well, so the trademark was apparently registered in the 1950s for coin laundry, but it was created in the 1940s by Westinghouse Electric Corporation to describe their new wall-mounted washing machine.
Oh, that's so interesting. One of the things that just naturally comes to me first when I think about terms that have been genericized is Google. Because like, I know people are out there using other browsers, but like who is doing it? Somebody uses DuckDuckGo that listens to our show. I know, because I saw on some analytics somewhere that like, I was like, DuckDuckGo? What is that? That sounds fun. So it's a website, a web browser. My husband got me a computer for Valentine's Day, which I so appreciate. And it as I turned it on was, hey, do you want to set up Microsoft Edge as your default browser? And I was like, why would I want to do that? I just Google stuff.
I need it to be Google.
I mean, you can actually use Google, the Google website on another browser, because you can go to google.com in any browser, but you know why? Although I will say on my phone, I refuse to use the Google Chrome browser. I only use Safari on my phone. I don't know why.
Actually, now that you say that, same. On my phone, it's Safari.
Like 10 bajillion tabs open. Apparently, there is a number limit to the number of tabs that you are allowed to have open because I've reached it. But instead of going and closing all of the tabs that I have open with them, don't know what they are and will never scroll back up and look at, I just close, the most recent one so that I can open a new tab. So whatever the number is, I reached it. Max number.
You found it, and open. You're just keep closing the one
on the phone
instead of going back through and seeing which ones you really need.
It doesn't run poorly, but I wonder if it would be faster if I closed all those tabs. Probably.
Well, you should definitely. I think that's a great test. You should check that out.
But if I close them, then I'll never be able to go back and see what I was thinking about that I probably was in the middle of and then left forever. So the thought will be gone.
But if you go back to that very first one, have you ever gone back to that very first
one? Maybe we should do this while I'm there next weekend.
We can review these and see how many of the same thing you have opened on different tabs.
Probably a lot. We are close enough friends that I would let you see my Google tabs. That could be interesting.
That's how you know you're good friends. That's how you know you're good friends.
That's how you know you're good friends, is if you would say, hey, my plane's going down and I'm going to need you to delete my browsing history. Another term that I was really surprised to find was genericized was bubble wrap. That is apparently a brand name, bubble wrap. Didn't know it. Photoshop is an Adobe brand name, but I just thought Photoshop was a thing you did, like you photoshopped the photo. But
it's editing. It's editing software.
Right, but it's actually a brand name. So just like you Googled, you photoshopped.
Photoshop it.
This one I think will be a surprise to you unless you read the agenda. A seeing eye dog technically is only a seeing eye dog if they are trained by Seeing Eye, the company.
Oh, I did not know that.
Well, now you know.
Because otherwise, what are they
Otherwise,
referred to as?
well,
Like just a
they're referred to as seeing eye dogs, but apparently, like seeing eye is the company that I don't know if they
the service
started
animal,
training them
probably
but
like service animal, but then
yeah,
seeing eye
was the
was
name
associated.
of the company. Yes, interesting. Some others, Dumpster is a brand name.
Like just large garbage bin.
I put it in the bin. I don't know. Frisbee, jacuzzi. I guess I did know about jacuzzi, but you just kind of don't think about that. Jet ski is a brand name. So I don't know what you would call a jet ski
Oh.
that's not a jet ski, like a Kawasaki. I don't know. Like, what would you call it? A water,
I think probably like a
water
water.
motorcycle?
I doubt water motorcycle.
Well, it's going to be a new thing.
Hashtag water motorcycle.
A hula hoop? What else would you call a hula hoop?
A torture device. Like
An exercise circle? Like, I don't know. An escalator? Have you ever heard an escalator called anything else?
no, but I think elevator is the same thing. Like it's not technically it has
A lift.
become,
You would call an elevator a lift.
but it's been referred to,
Yeah.
picked up as elevator.
An elevator. A fiberglass.
What else?
You know, that
What?
fiberglass, that
Yeah, I
stuff.
know what it is. I know what it is, but like
that's a
what
that's
is
a it's a brand name. Tupperware.
that one I know.
I mean, I say that all the time, and I am,
Even when it's not Tupperware.
even if it's Gladware. Tupperware is like,
Don't get mad, get glad.
technically, that's not Tupperware. Popsicle.
You have a friend that does that?
No.
Okay. What would you do if you did have a friend that did that?
Well, apparently you do.
I mean, I did.
That's not. Oh, they're not. You're not friends anymore. Is it over?
I mean,
this
we're
incident?
not. It's over
Is-
the tissue incident.
Yeah.
No, no, it is not.
I can't think of
Can't be
any
your
friends that
friend.
have done that, but I probably wonder if I'm that friend.
All right, I'm gonna start keeping an ear out.
Did you know that that's actually not a crock pot? Because it doesn't say crock pot on it. That's
Right.
an off-brand. Can you imagine?
Oh dear, we've created a monster. I think
Yeah.
one that's interesting is Coke, because regionally, like Coke,
Oh, yeah.
pop, soda, like all of that is so based on where you're at.
I grew up in Kansas. We didn't say we're going to have a Coke. We said soda pop.
See,
I think
yeah,
down here in Texas, maybe we just say soda. I don't hear anybody say pop.
yeah,
It's just soda.
definitely soda.
But I definitely grew up with like soda pop or pop, which sounds really weird the more I say
Does sound
it.
really weird.
You want to have a pop?
Now, is
Soda
that
pop.
the bubble wrap pop, or is that a beverage pop, or popsicle?
Popsicle, also a brand name. Yeah, crazy. A couple of others: thermos, aspirin, chapstick. I was definitely looking for chapstick today because I needed it because my lips are so dry in this weather. And the chapstick I have is Kind Lips. So it's not chapstick. It's
But whenever you're looking for it, are you asking, have you seen my kind lips?
no. I'm also not asking, I can't find my lip balm, which is technically what it is. It's lip balm, but I can't say the word balm without being weird. So it's just chapstick. AstroTurf is a brand name. I don't know if like you just call it turf if it's not AstroTurf. I have been wanting to replace our yard with turf because under the trees the grass doesn't like to grow. But
Oh,
I think it's probably against the HOA. Also because like dirt and bugs, gross. Like I always think, and I have a grass allergy. So I always, as a kid, like wanted to go roll around in the grass. But when I did, I would like be itchy all over and have little
Yeah.
red dots all over. Um, so the idea of grass being like so lush and, like you just want to walk in it, um, I never have had the feeling that goes along with the feeling of that idea. In reality, it's
Yeah.
always like, oh, there's bugs, there's ants crawling on me, and there's dirt, and I'm dirty. And,
Whose idea was it to walk through this lush grass barefooted?
like in those romance movies where they're
Yeah.
like on a picnic or something in the grass. Like, cool if it's AstroTurf, but otherwise, I'm not interested.
Don't sign me up. Thank
Don't,
you.
don't sign me up. Don't sign me up.
I mean,
So
look at us. We are learning so much together
we are.
with all of this content that we are educating ourselves on.
This is going to serve you well in trivia.
It sure is.
Now you know.
I'm the type of friend that I will go to trivia if you need someone else to like complete your team. Like you have to have 6 people to sign up and someone bailed, but I am not the person you want on your trivia team.
We should do trivia. Karaoke.
Hey. We have a whole list of things apparently that we're going to have to get done.
I think we're not going to have enough time.
Probably not. Probably not. Okay. So, to wrap us up, we truly believe in the practice of gratitude. And so interested to hear, how all of you, practice gratitude, if you do, in your day-to-day lives. Is it something you reflect on in the morning? Do you have a gratitude journal? Interested just to hear how people keep gratitude in the forefront of their day-to-day lives. You do.
Yeah. So let us know. Also, what's some of the best advice that you've received? We would love to hear about your advice. We'd love for you to share. We'd love to put your advice into our toolkits as well. So please reach out, share your advice. Share your how you practice gratitude. We'll take that advice as well. And you can text us, you can call, you can email us. Email is chrisjeninthemorning@gmail.com. But look in the description for all of our contact information. We definitely want to hear from you. And we really appreciate you tuning in and having a conversation with us today. So thank you for listening in. And just remember, it's always morning somewhere.